Yeah. Welcome to Koru Education, the News Roundup podcast. We've moved the podcast from the Thursday to a Friday just to allow me a little bit more time to polish the production side of it and so forth as our viewing figures improve. So thank you for your patience. Friday is a good time to listen to this anyway. Big welcome to Kaylee Leisure once again, who's here to talk about all the amazing stuff going on in education and maybe some of the not so amazing stuff too. So welcome. Listen, before we actually start today, I just want to flag up the fact that Koru Education have got a big trip coming up. We're keynoting for this year conference in Hanoi with British Vietnamese International School and Fabricia. Very excited about that to be the opening keynote. Then we're heading on to the Festival of Education in Bangkok, literally the next day. I won't be tired at all. And we're doing some bits and pieces there. And then we're heading on to New Zealand, where I'm opening keynote at the Whitira Ngāti Toa Summit of Education, looking at the future of education. So I'll be talking a little bit about AI and the future of education provision there. Really interesting stuff coming up. Do take a look at the website if you get the chance. So, Kaylee, this week, what are we going to be talking about? What's the theme?
So this week our theme is kind of based around inclusion.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dog's just wandered in and sneezed in the middle of our production. She's doing really well today. So no, I mean, it's a topic that has come up a couple of times in our previous podcast, and it's something that we're delving into today because there has been a lot in the news over the last couple of weeks around inclusion. It is a big theme coming up.
Yeah. Okay, so first article that we've sort of picked out is by a chap called Alex Quigley, who's the author of Why Learning Fails. Particular fan of his work, and I love the ideas. And this article is a little bit about the new Ofsted framework and how inclusion is being included as part of that, and also sort of widening out of the definition of inclusion. And I kind of really like that idea of broadening inclusion out. That idea of meeting youngsters where they're at, and that sense of sort of creating that sense of belonging and connection, I think is important. I wonder if being part of an Ofsted framework is really the way to facilitate that.
This is a really interesting question because I love Alex Quigley's work. I've loved all of it, everything that he's done, the vocabulary gap, the reading gap. It is sensible. It is helpful for teachers in the classroom. It's not too theoretical, and so a lot of me wants to jump on board with what he's saying in this. And I love the fact that in this article, as you go down, there are key actual physical things that he talks about that are doable, scaffolding, explicit instruction, things that we as educators can kind of look to and go, well, that's not too woolly. Like that is something that I can grab hold of and do something for. On the other hand, I still have PTSD from Ofsted. I know I do. I know that deep down in my soul, it was quite a traumatic event. And so
did it help you become a better teacher? Did your students benefit?
God's no. For that week of hell, no, nobody benefited. It was just awful. And I don't think it wasn't a true reflection on what was going on in our school, not in a bad way nor a good way. I think it was just a very fake environment because there were all these things that we wanted to prove that we were doing, but we were doing. And then in the proving of, you lost a lot of that. And unfortunately, it's one of those Ofsteds that was right before Christmas. It was like the week before Christmas, and Christmas was cancelled. And it was just rough. It was a rough event. Having said that, I do think having having some things that you have, real physical practical things in a framework that you can look at does take a lot of that fear away. I think one of the reasons why we were so afraid was because we didn't know what they were looking for. It was so woolly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
I think
having these things, I think, is really good. And I yeah, like I say, I love the work. So
I've kind of got to be, I've got to sort of separate the pragmatist in me from the idealist. And given the nature of my work now, where I'm not having to manage schools or work with kids on a daily basis, as it were, I can be a little more idealist and a little less pragmatic. I look at the stuff in there, and like you, the practicalities of what are in there are really good.
yeah.
I do wonder if Ofsted have got a long way to go before they're actually a force for good. I need to be a little bit careful about going too far with my opinions on that, but I do question the way they operate as an accountability only service rather than a developmental service. And in the same way that you don't just berate kids when they fail and tell them that they've got a good mark when they pass, you do developmental work along the way. And I just wonder why we haven't managed to build that into the way we work with schools and so on quite as effectively as we might.
Yeah.
I think most teachers would be inclusive given the right circumstances and training and support. And I wonder if the problem is less about by framing it in an accountability model like Ofsted, you're effectively saying, well, you're being lazy if you don't do it. Whereas if you flip that model and turn it into something developmental, then there's a totally different paradigm of relationship there. And I think that's probably the way forward. And I bring that idea from the classroom. You never get anywhere when you tell kids off for doing badly, and you wouldn't want to.
No.
You only get somewhere when you build a relationship of trust and you've got developmental inputs and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of my take on this. I think inclusion by design is a great idea. I welcome the fact that it's broadening out, particularly.
Yep.
And practically what Alex Quigley offers up in this article is great, as you would expect, but perhaps Ofsted is not necessarily the place to do that. And I think Ofsted often is guilty of over legislating and not really interpreting what they see effectively.
Yeah, it's interesting. This one will have to be a watch and see, because this could be a true step in the right direction, making it practical, making it less woolly, making it something that's very transparent, or it could just add to the trauma of the Ofsted.
Yeah,
Might
I
be a watch
suppose
and
the
see.
question for me is, does it help you as a teacher meet youngsters where they're at? And if it does that, well, all the politics and all of the other stuff don't really matter, I suppose. So yeah, I'm like you. I'm nearly on board, but not quite. Yeah. Okay. There was this other article by Sammy Timamy about invented SEND labels, disabling pupils. And now you and I have quite different perspectives around this, which is fine. In fact, to be encouraged. We welcome all sorts of opinions here. But when I read this, I'm not necessarily in agreement with the reasons behind what Sammy says, but I think perhaps the sort of where he gets to, this idea of SEND labels need to be removed, the concept of diagnosis needs to be stripped out of the work that we do in schools. I've said that before in other formats and other settings, whereby I'm not sure that the use of SEND labels are always that helpful. In fact, quite often they can put a target on a child's back. They can make them live towards the diagnosis rather than necessarily just being who they are. And again, it kind of ties into this idea that if we create labels and channels and boxes for people, then they'll fit in them and we'll kind of generalize. And we all know that dyslexia presents in many, many different forms.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that autism presents in many, many different forms. And both of those things are possibly not fully understood yet, certainly on
Mm-hmm.
a wider basis, even if the research base has a pretty good grasp of them in terms of everyday understanding. They're not. And I just wonder if maybe there's a different route to dealing with youngsters. Just meet them where they are. We all have our foibles and frailties, you and I included. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just kind of wonder whether Sammy's onto something here. I don't know what your thoughts are, Caleb.
I thought this was a really interesting article, and I would suggest to anybody who has the time who wants to go and read this and dig in a little bit more. He definitely says, supportive relationships do far more than abstract labels, and that is definitely something that I'm like, yes, I can get behind that. I love that. And
Oh, hold on, Sammy.
hold on, no. And I also am a firm believer in the fact that sometimes by addressing somebody's difficulty, whether that is formal diagnosis, and official plans, gives children the right to things that they wouldn't have the right to before. So it does make sure that every teacher puts in place the support that they need, regardless of teachers who believe that this is the right thing or not. Because most educators out there are wonderful, intelligent, professional beings, but we've all worked with some who aren't, who are struggling for whatever reason to be the best teacher that they want to be. And if
No
something
names,
is
no names, please.
no names, 100% no. But sometimes you need somebody to say, no, this child has the right to, photocopies in bigger print, has the right to this accommodation. And I think that then protects the child, and that's what we're all about. So I really am. I love the idea behind it. However, I think in this times where people really are scrabbling for funding, like we are trying to scratch every penny out of every pound or cent out of every euro to get the things that children need. Sometimes having that written down on paper, this is a right, I am entitled to it, helps with that. In an ideal world, it would be lovely if we didn't need it, but we
Yeah,
do.
I think that's probably fair. In Newcastle, they've come up with an interesting third way around this. There's just a 5-6 year wait to get any diagnosis on anything, and or you can pay the £3,000 for the diagnosis and ed psych report yourself. And actually, in some senses, what that means is that you end up negotiating stuff with the teachers directly, and speaking to them directly. And actually, as long as the teachers are doing good stuff with the child, then the rest kind of falls away in terms of its importance. Yeah, so there we go. Interesting article, or
Interesting article.
And I think it probably ties into this really, which is fundamental. This idea that perhaps SEND and inclusion is faltering a little in the UK. And given that this article here is a comparison between the UK, well, England and the US, I'd be interested to hear your take on this, because you've got experience in both places.
So this was a really interesting article for me, because I've got one foot in both doors with an American husband, having worked in an American school, but being British. I've seen kind of both kind of educational systems play out, and I thought this was really interesting. I have some big opinions about this. I think that one of the reasons that England has, from the outside, better inclusion for students is because in England, because we agree to the human rights, we have bought into this European rights of the child. we have a right. All children have a right to education. They have a legal document that supports the fact that they have the right to these things. In the US, there is no constitutional right to education. It is not written in there. Now,
Really?
really, there are federal laws which support, all children getting education and not being discriminated against. However, just like Roe v. Wade, it's come through the Supreme Court and they can be overturned. So one of the real reasons why I think, subscribing to this idea of the rights of the child and us having human rights and being part of that, one of the things that we signed up for when we were within Europe, and one of the reasons I keep campaigning for us to continue to, despite what some politicians might think, is because it does give, again, a right, something legal. And this article was really interesting because basically it goes through the different stories of the US versus UK and fights for inclusion of different students. And one of the things that came out was that in the US, parents are often alone and fight alone. And I think that's also the case in England. But the fight is they do have a right in England to state education. And it's tricky. It's interesting.
Yeah. I guess the provision of that right in itself makes it harder for it to be denied.
For sure.
And even if the right exists in the US that's not constitutional, then it's a harder route to police that and enforce that right. I suppose for me, and when I look at this, I look at sort of SEND provision. And I think back to the Sammy Timmy article as well, that I wonder if the sort of all of the administration that goes around the send provision and whatnot kind of chews up time, resources, and things like that, when actually we could really just be focusing it on dealing with children if we were able to strip some of that out. Again, I recognize that I'm perhaps more of an idealist now than I used to be, and I suspect that you do a little bit more work in schools directly and with teachers directly than I do, so you perhaps still got a bit more of that sort of pragmatic, practical approach around what you do. But I just wonder if we could strip all of that rubbish out, all of that kind of administration out. Would teachers have more time to just relate to kids?
I think it's going to be really interesting looking at what the executive order of Trump has done and the stripping of the Department of Education. You might be able to sit here in a year's time and say, Kaylee, by stripping it all out, look what's happened. And isn't that amazing? I think we've got a real life situation happening.
Well, there's a couple of unlikely allies, myself and Donald Trump. I never thought I'd hear that in a sentence. I
mean, we can see, we can watch and see. We'll watch and see how this plays out. My gut says no. But we're living in interesting times, and we'll have to look and see, because these decisions are being made, and we'll have to see what the impact is. I think it's definitely worth everybody in the educational field, both in England, abroad, and in the US, keeping a watching brief on what's happening. This is why it's so important to have a connected world, because I think we learn from what's going on in other places.
I think it's also important to go on record on the podcast that it may have been suggested that I'm aligned with Donald Trump in this respect. I hadn't recognized that myself until you mentioned it, Kaylee.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
And I would certainly want to limit it to the point that you've raised and nothing further, just to be absolutely clear.
I think watch this space. I would hate to tar you with the same brush, Chris. No, that's not what I meant. But definitely worth taking a look at, because I
just kind of wonder if we're missing the point with inclusion, that maybe it's not about the different sort of learning challenges that individual youngsters face and things like that. Maybe inclusion is just about making people feel that they belong, that they can talk and that they trust who they're working with at a particular point in time to air those challenges. You know, my son's dyslexic, and 2 years ago it was a massive challenge for him. We found avenues to work around it, to manage it, to deal with it. His progress has gone on massively well, and he's a different child to the one he was 2 years ago, and that's largely drawn from his sense of belonging, his relationships, and the trust that he has in the people around him, particularly his teachers at school. And I just kind of wonder if maybe we're missing the point with inclusion.
And I think that thought there feeds beautifully into this last article that we're looking at, right? Which is to do with mixed age classes in an international kind of school setting. Which for me, having worked in a school which had mixed age classrooms in their primary setting, having set it up like that and having maintained that, I think is exactly what you're talking about. It's 100% towards that.
Yeah. I've got to stop you here and revert back to my previous life as a pragmatist. And yeah, I look at this and I love the idea. I absolutely love it. As someone that had to do timetabling, it sends a shiver down my spine. And as a former academic head, the idea of bringing all of that stuff together in a practical, workable fashion just feels administratively horrible. And even it starts to make me feel a little bit stressed just thinking about it. Timetabling wasn't really my strength. It was my trauma, but not my strength. And I look at that, but then I think about it from a youngster's perspective and what it gives them. And I think, wow, that is the ideal. And it raises that question, doesn't it? Are schools set up to be administratively comfortable for people like myself? Or should schools be set up rooted in pedagogy and social development and all of those kind of things? And do we need to change what we do?
I mean, I think you can see from my face which side I sit on the fence of that. I think while I was training, I think it was Sir Ken Roberts who came up with this idea of batch education, born out of the Industrial Revolution, where these children have a born by date and therefore are batch educated with kids of their own age, and it's the only time that you are forced to spend the majority of your time with people of your same age based on when you were born, which is insane. No other time in the rest of your humanhood will you be doing that, because we're not all the same. I do like timetabling. There's something I quite liked doing that. And I didn't find it wasn't always easy, but it wasn't that hard, and should certainly not be the reason why we're not doing something that is pedagogically right. I love a good Montessori style child first, child at the center situation. And I love the fact that this international school has made it big scale. It has more than 1,800 pupils, and yet they're making it work. With this mixed age classes, where everybody's getting what they need. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I'm for it.
I do too. I love it. And I'm going to make a plug here as well, because at the Festival of Education in Bangkok on the 8th of November at Wellington College, thank you Educationscape for putting that on, I'll be speaking about whether schools are fit for purpose and the future of education. And it's exactly this. Is our model that we use in schools just administratively convenient, or could we change it to something infinitely more exciting and helpful for children? But again, that's the idealist that I am now, and not the pragmatist that I once was. There we go. Kaylee Leisure, we're running out of time again.
We are running out of time every week.
And that says a lot about the quality of the conversation. So thank you so much, Kaylee.
No, thank you.
And
it's been
great
interesting
stuff to talk about this week. We'll be going out on Friday this week, so keep an eye out. Available on all good streaming platforms, apart from Apple, because Apple's really complicated to get the stuff loaded onto. So we will be on Spotify, YouTube, Blue Sky, and on LinkedIn. And we'd love you to like the show, share it with your friends, get in touch if you've got queries. And we're looking for guests as well.
Yeah.
So get in touch.
If anything's popped up this week that it's really struck a chord with you, please get in touch. We would love to hear opinions from anywhere in the world. It'd be super interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
For sure. Thank you, Kaylee. See you again in a fortnight.
Yep. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.